that should be needed because their job is sacrosanct and set apart. They take care of the tabernacle, the sacrifices and all of that, okay? But again, there's always other interpretations. The 12th century sage who lived in France, who goes by the acronym Rashi, was Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzhak, and so Rashi becomes Rashi. And Rashi observed, because the love of Israel is before God, he counts them every hour. And a poet has written that God counts each single irreplaceable dear head, beloved ones in both freedom and in sin. It is this stressing upon the individual that we know. And the rabbis even said, why did they say count the heads? You know, instead of just count the individuals. Count the heads, because the head is where the face is. And so the importance is everyone has a face. Everyone is an individual. And that is who we are counting. Over 600,000. So counting and the wilderness both play in the very first phrase of the book of Numbers. The chronological scope is interesting to me because we know if we use the calendaring of the book of Numbers itself, it notes 38 of the 40 years of wandering are recorded in the book of Numbers. No wandering is recorded in the book of Leviticus because, as I say, it's sort of just a technical manual about leading a holy life. But Exodus, so from the time they cross the Red Sea and the Egyptian army is drowned, then they know they are truly free, or they're free from slavery in Egypt at least. And so what, a year and a half? And then in Deuteronomy time, maybe 6 months. It seems like it takes Moses 6 months to deliver both of those sermons. They're so huge that we're going to encounter in Deuteronomy, but no, not really. You know how it is when you feel like, you know the story about the guest rabbi who came to the synagogue and he preached. He was invited to preach, and so he got up and he started, and it just got longer and longer and longer. And he kind of became aware, so he sat down and he told the rabbi there, he said, I'm sorry I went so long, but there wasn't a clock. And the minister says to him, yeah, well, that's all right, but right in front of you there was a calendar. So 38 years pass in the book of Numbers. So that's kind of an interesting thing. The tabernacle, the construction and the dedication of the tabernacle takes up a lot of space. This is the physical place in which God's glory dwelled for a wandering people. Here is a reconstruction today of what the tabernacle may have looked like and its approximate dimensions. And this is in the desert, in the wilderness, in Israel today. Now imagine at a time of assembly that on each of the four sides, 3 full tribes with their elders in front were arrayed around this tabernacle. Imagine what that sight would have looked like to assemble Israel. And hold on to that when we get to a story a little bit later in the book of Numbers. The diagram here is an idea based on what the scriptures say about what the floor plan of the tabernacle was. Excuse me. I have water. It's basically 2 chambers separated by a curtain. The larger chamber to the right of the diagram is the sanctuary. And there you see the candelabra, which is described in great detail about how it's constructed and its 7 lights. And it is the reason that synagogues have candelabra in their worship today. There is opposite it a table that the showbread, the bread was laid, and And then right before you get to the curtain was the stand for the incense. And the incense was, of course, very carefully prescribed, how it was made, what it was composed of, and all that. There are these three poles that support, and inside the Holy of Holies, which is the smaller of the two rooms, behind the curtain is the Ark of the Covenant. You remember from the movie, right? Okay. The Ark of the Covenant that travels with Israel wherever it wanders, and then is set up here wherever they reside for a while. Supposedly, the ark contains within it the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments. And that's all that's in there. But that's enough. It's called the Holy of Holies. This is the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies. In sanctuaries today, in synagogues, the sanctuary is the building itself, really maybe the raised platform, the bema, the altar area. And then the Holy of Holies is represented by the ark, which is in the same relationship and contains not tablets, but the Torah scrolls itself. And the candelabrum are there. There's also the eternal light, which is symbolic of what's on the table outside. If you go back to the photograph, you see the altar, which is the square item in the front. That is the altar on which the sacrifices were actually made, and a lavabo basin, a place for the priest to wash before making the sacrifice. Purity being, essential in all of that. So, maybe not a prepossessing building to us today. It doesn't look like great real estate, but this was a most holy locus for the Israelites. I was going, well, let me leave it at that. Numbers is where we find one of the most celebrated and beloved passages in the Bible, the MYF benediction. I have been privileged to see the oldest existing copy of this that dates from the 7th century before the Common Era, which would have been in the time of the First Temple. It was found in about 1979. I think Moffitt refers to it in here, as I recall. It was found in the late 1970s on a dig in Jerusalem. And it is a piece of a parchment, well, it's a parchment scroll excerpt on which is the book of Numbers, and the page that's found was the book of Numbers and this blessing. And you can see it at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. It is so cool. And it is the oldest existing parchment that we know of from the first temple, which is really amazing, 7th century BCE. So there it is. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. May you be blessed. And I did kind of try to do a literal translation in the word order, which is not the best, it's not the smoothest English, but may you be blessed by God. The may you be blessed is one word. Actually, may you be blessed by Adonai, the middle word is God. V'yishmerecha, and kept. May you be blessed by God and kept. The second line, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha vichuneka. Necha. May God's face, panav is the third word, that's face, Adonai, the second word. May God's face shine, that's the first word, on you. And the last word, and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God lift his panav, his face. That means his face. Elecha, toward you. V'yasem, and cause to be made lecha, to you, shalom. Which you know that word. This blessing, the priestly benediction, the Birchat Kohanim in Hebrew, was used by the priests to bless the people at occasions. On Friday evenings, parents recite this blessing to their children. And there's a couple of other little nice blessings that go with that. And that's part of the routine. It closes a lot of synagogue services. It closes a wedding ceremony and so forth. It's used a lot, just like we use it a lot in so many respects. One Jewish commentator notes the structure of the original Hebrew, which is 3 words, 5 words, and 7 words. 3, 5, 7. Saying, this was an 11th century Jewish philosopher in Spain, and he says, they remind us of the foundation for all blessings. The 3 patriarchs, 3 words, 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The 5 books of the Torah, and the 7 heavens. Well, the sages love numerology. They just love it. I mean, they're just all about it, you know. Sudoku, they probably wouldn't have gotten nearly as much work done, you know, because they just love numbers and, all of that. So I'm just, saying it's another way for the Pharisees to have wasted their time was on Sudoku. There is a Hasidic teaching. Now, the Hasidim are the rather ecstatic sect of very Orthodox Jews who sprung up in the 18th century in Europe, Eastern Europe. Our little center for the Hasidic Judaism is the Lubavitcher Center called Beit Ariel on Overton Road, and you probably know where that is. The synagogue next to it is the sort of traditional Orthodox synagogue that's actually been in Birmingham since the 1880s, started out on the north side of downtown where the Jewish community lived in the 19th century. But anyway, that's they are the Lubavitcher sect of Hasidic Judaism, and they are probably one of the more outreach-oriented of the Hasidim, who tend to be rather insular and want to keep to themselves a lot. But anyway, a Hasidic teaching is this. Why do we ask, and he's talking about the first 3 words, why do we ask God first to bless us and then keep or guard us? Because if God does give us material blessings, we need to be protected from the evil result such prosperity may bring. That's what we're being kept from. If you have blessing, don't get greedy with it. Don't get corrupted by your good fortune. Moffitt talks about this. Basically a protection from hubris. There's another quote in the Talmud from the great collection. Would love to do a series on this one day, called the Pirkei Avot, the sayings of the fathers. It's not part of the Torah, but it's part of the Talmud. And it says, do not use the Torah as a spade with which to dig. I remember Rabbi Grafman quoting that to me, not that he was accusing me of using the Torah as a spade with which to dig, but it came up in a conversation. At any rate, this is, and Moffitt jumps on this. He doesn't bring that quote in specifically, but he does bring in on page 129 a quote from one of my personal heroes, the late Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched in Selma, who was the descendant of a long line of Hasidic rabbis in Eastern Europe, but became more liberal and ended up teaching at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, just got out of Nazi Germany in time before he was probably to be transported. There was a lot of it was dangerous. And he ended up actually at the Reformed Seminary, gave him a job so he would have a reason to get out in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he did teach there out of gratitude, but he was miserable. It was just a little too liberal for him. So he went to the conservative, sort of middle of the road sect in a branch of Judaism, and the seminary was in New York. But wonderful, wonderful author and thinker. This quote from Seigel is in Moffic's book, and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. Seigel writes, "There has indeed been so much pious abuse that the Bible is often in need of being saved from the hands of its admirers." Yeah. Okay. So that's it. One more commentator. I believe this is an English rabbi named Rabbi Morris Joseph, but for some reason in the source I looked at, it was listed as Joseph Morris, and I don't know any rabbi named Joseph Morris. I think they just turned it around. But anyway, one final word on the blessing, especially of the last part, of grant you peace. Peace, say the rabbis, is one of the pillars of the world. Without it, the social order could not exist. Therefore, let humankind do all it can to promote it. The Jew who is true to himself will labor with special energy in the cause of peace. The war-loving Jew is a contradiction in terms. Only the peace-loving Jew is a true follower of his prophets, who set universal brotherhood in the forefront of their pictures of coming happiness for all, predicting the advent of a golden age when nations should not lift up sword against nation, nor learn war anymore. The middle blessing, I don't want to gloss over it. Sometimes it's translated a little bit differently. May God lift his face, but his countenance, same word, shine on you and be gracious. And they focus on this word gracious. We talk a lot about grace in Christianity, and we don't tend to talk about it too much in Judaism. And the concepts are really very much the same, but the emphasis is different. Grace in Judaism, this graciousness, is the kind that we think of when we think of forbearance and compassion and thinking outside of ourselves and toward others. And grace is something that we foster within us. We do focus less on grace from God, but it's not a strong difference in my opinion. I've thought a lot about grace, and because we hear a lot about it in church, and I've been in church a long time. And it prompted me to do a little investigation about, well, I know there's grace in Judaism, but we don't ever talk about it. What is it? Well, it's kind of a commonplace. Grace is that quality that allows us to be beyond ourselves. And when we are given blessings by God and kept, what it's saying is that we are being kept in order that our blessings will be the grace that we bestow upon others and the world. So it's a very powerful, what is it? 3, 5, 7, 15 words in Hebrew? Yeah. So there it is. Now, we didn't have a lot of drama in Leviticus except for the 2 priests who got burned up for alien fire and all that. But there's a lot of drama in the book of Numbers. The first is the people whining about they're tired of manna. That's, come on, people they're gonna complain, People gonna beef. That's just what it is. And it was about beef or chicken or whatever. They just remembered, they were longing for the flesh pots of Egypt. And by golly, what a short memory they had. But again, most of them didn't know Egypt. That generation was dying. They died in the wilderness, including Moses, including Aaron and Miriam. The generation that crossed into the promised land was not ever personally experiencing Egyptian slavery, though they knew all about it because the previous generation made sure they knew, just like our generation. Daniel was watching, when he was really little, he was watching a cartoon on Saturday morning, and of course, being a family of utter class, it was a Warner Brothers cartoon. It was Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner and the Coyote, because this is sophisticated entertainment. and it teaches life lessons. And if you don't think so, you need to go find a few and download them. You know, the singing frog, that's a parable, friends. That's a parable, the singing frog. Anyway, well, I digress. But at any rate, it was something, and I think it was a Roadrunner cartoon or something, and it did this slow pan of just sand, dunes and sand, and, you know, nothing but sand and mountains in the distance. It was a desert, you know. And Daniel just talks to himself. He says, that's where we were slaves. And I was like, yes, Warner Brothers, you go, baby. Remember, those Warner boys were Jewish. Okay, so the people are rebelling. They're tired of the manna and all that. God, he's ready to annihilate everybody. You know, Moses talks him down. But even Moses begins to complain in the book of Numbers. How long will this people be a thorn in my side? You know, listen to Hill's sermon today about that. It's, yeah. Anyway, so there's that. That's minor compared to what's going to happen. Korach, an esteemed, respected member of the community, begins to murmur against Moses and Aaron, and 250 also people of renown join with him against Moses' leadership style. He's a Levite, and his followers are persons of repute. And his argument is that the entire population is holy. We were all at the mountain. We all accepted the covenant. So why do you set yourself apart? So this is a leadership issue. This is a management issue. Moses responds by falling on his face. And then he allows God to answer Korach through him, proposing a test the next morning. Korach's representatives and the Israelite reps will each bring an offering of burning incense to the altar, and God will choose which is the more acceptable. He warns, you have gone too far, ye sons of Levi. So the next morning, God appears and says, let me just obliterate the whole thing and just start over. Y'all go to a safe place, and I'm just going to take care of this whole thing. It'll be, you know. And Moses again says, you know, let this happen, you know. Well, Moses does tell everyone who is loyal to withdraw from the dwelling places of the wicked people. And just as he does that, there's a trembling in the ground, the earth opens up, and bye-bye. They are drawn down to Sheol, the place where the dead were said to reside. That's not in the Bible that the dead are there, but that was the common understanding. Sheol is also a smelly place, and later, when Jerusalem was settled, Sheol was akin to Gehenna, and Gehenna is a huge garbage dump in Israel down from the hill that is known as the place of the skull, Golgotha, and the Temple Mount, and down in this ravine is where the garbage went. Waste management, Gehenna, and that's what Gehenna was. Anyway, so the 250 followers of Korach were consumed by fire. Now, their dwellings and their families were all swallowed up by the earthquake. But it's not over. The next day, the Israelites confront Moses and Aaron, again angry, charging that they had brought death upon the Lord's people. Again, God comes into the scene and says, let me do it. Come on, let me just wipe them out. Let me wipe them out. And he brings a plague. And Moses and Aaron work quickly, and they go through the manual in the book of Leviticus, and they prepare the incense, the sin offering. And remember, sin is to be forgiven. And they are able to check the plague. We didn't have to wear masks after maybe a while, but not before nearly 15,000 had perished. There's a tractate in that, I mentioned the sayings of the fathers, the chapters of the fathers from the Talmud, and it is a wonderful thing. But there's a paragraph there that talks about when you have disagreements and the kinds of disagreements. I go to faculty meetings, and we're like the Sanhedrin. We have the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai, and you line up, and somebody raises a point of order, and da 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 da, and it's more like House of Parliament, I guess. It's like House of Commons. We're yelling at each other. No, we're not. But at any rate, you have factions and you have politics, and you get into it. But at the end of the day, we're all working for the common good. If only Washington would remember that. The tractate says, and maybe I'll go read this in Montgomery or something, every controversy that is in the name of heaven shall in the end lead to a permanent result. But every controversy that is not in the name of heaven shall not lead to a permanent result. Which controversy was in the name of heaven? The controversy of Hillel and Shammai. That's where they're debating holy things out of the right motivation and sense. And which was not in the name of heaven? The controversy of Korach and all his company. So that refers back to our story here. Speaking of hubris, I think Moses got a real raw deal. The people were complaining, they were thirsty, they were desperate. Moses says, all right, gather everybody here at this in front of this big rock. And he takes the rod, which had flowered earlier in the book of Numbers. Remember, he turned it into a snake, or God turned it into a snake in Pharaoh's palace. This is a great rod. But anyway, Moses strikes the rock and water gushes forth, and the people are assuaged. And God reminds him later that because he did not give the immediate credit to the source of the miracle, he would not enter the promised land. Ain't that something? And all I can say is that sin is forgiven, but I guess if you're the big guy, some sins are forgiven a little less lightly or whatever. But God does not let Moses into the promised land. He gets him right to the door. And pretty soon in the book of Numbers, we see that Moses does something about that. In other tales of strife in the book of Numbers, both Aaron and Miriam rebel against Moses because he married an outsider, a Cushite. The land of Cush was, anybody? Yeah, Ethiopia specifically. Ethiopia. Well, he married a black girl. All right? And God didn't like that either. Miriam was stricken with snow white scales for bad-mouthing her brother, her little brother. But it was temporary. So just saying, there's a lot of consequences in Numbers. We talk a lot about purity laws. There's a lot of them. Some of them are really harsh. The nature of the biblical ordeal is discussed in the book of Numbers, that if a woman is caught in adultery and everything, that she has to drink this water that's made a certain way and it's got dirt in it and everything, I don't know. And depending on what happens, her physical reaction, she's either guilty or innocent. That's sort of like, in Salem, Massachusetts, you throw a witch in the water, and if she floats, she's something, and if she doesn't float, she's something else. I don't remember what the proof test was, but it sort of smacks of that. Actually, those same first century Pharisees, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, in fact, said this is a bad practice, and he just said this will never happen again. So here he is, him just taking something right in the Torah and saying, no, we ain't doing that. And it's been outlawed ever since. So it's an interesting idea. Anyway, that's it. So purity laws. We have a lot of purity laws. And I think the thing, just to move ahead, and I have to leave out so much, is to say that impurity is not such an awful thing. We get impure all the time. Impurity happens. To quote the old bumper sticker, impurity happens. It's not a sin, it's a condition. And the Torah tells us what we have to do to get past that and move on so that we can be impure again the next day. And that's it. Priests cannot touch a dead body. They can't even, to this day, they're not supposed to enter a cemetery because they would be that close. And it was that medieval idea that the body had all kinds of maybe magic in it that would make the ritual impure or something, and all of that. So there's a lot of laws and a lot of things, some of which are no longer really relevant, thank goodness, that are covered in Numbers. And then there is the idea of religious asceticism, specifically the Nazarites. Now, asceticism in Judaism is really not the norm. We have it, we have had it, and it's not typically encouraged. Jewish thought and concept in life is very communal. It's always with others. Judaism says that you shouldn't even study the Torah alone, or at least not for long. But you should study with a partner, because you always need someone to counterbalance what you might be thinking and provide davar achar, another interpretation, which is just strewn throughout the Talmud. Oh, another interpretation, another interpretation. There's always, several people saying it. So when you read the Talmud, you almost hear the conversations going through among the Pharisees, the debates in God's name, debating these holy things. And some of them get kind of raucous, but they're all for the sake of heaven. In fact, in the Talmud, by the way, when there's a controversy that seems irrefutable, that there's just no right answer, it was said that a heavenly voice would descend and would say, both sides are the words of the living God, but Hillel is right. And so we're going to go with Hillel, but both are the words of the living God. That's a controversy in the name of heaven, So they're both right, but you're more right. Okay, so the Nazarites, Shammai could never win. I don't know. Anyway, the Nazarites were people who would take temporary vows. They weren't like Catholic monks or nuns. They would go off somewhere for a while and work things out. And they were not to shave or cut their hair. And they were to live these major religious life and use their time for reflection and prayer and study and all of this sort of thing. It didn't really even imply that they had to go off somewhere, although many did. The most famous Nazarite in the Bible is Samson, who was one of the judges. It is accounted in the book of Judges. And he grew his long hair out, and the pact with God in his case was that he had this great strength and physical strength. And God's deal was, if you just keep your hair uncut, then you'll keep your strength. And then what happens. There's always a Delilah in the woodwork, and so you know how it goes. But anyway, Achilles and his heel. But anyway, there it is. So we have a lot of this rites of purification, and we have the Nazarites. I do not know if there is a connection between Nazarites and the town of Nazareth, but it wouldn't surprise me. They'd probably have the same root. In Christianity, there is thought that John the Baptist may have been a Nazarite. My pharmacist at the Crestline Pharmacy may be a Nazarite. Matt's beard is unbelievable. If y'all know who I'm talking about, just saying. Love that guy. Then we get to a really fun part. Now, I got to tell you, Balaam may have just been an insert into the book of Numbers. It's pretty much a standalone story of dubious historical quality. There's no Moses, there's no Aaron, there's really no Israelites in it. But it's a great piece of comic relief, and comic relief from moral. I think they were thinking of Ralph when they put this in, because Ralph always likes a divertissement. You always want a little. You always give us the fun factor, in things. But then I've known you a long time, and you always did that. So we've got these people. So I thought animation was the best way to approach this story. So you got to have a stupid king. And we have Balak, And the Torah portion is called Balak. It's named for him because it's the first significant word. And it's a great story, and it's always in the summer when you get to this part of the Numbers. And so it talks about Balak, the king of Moab, the king of Midian. He is a Moabite who somehow has gotten to be king of Midian. I guess they're in connection at this point. The son of Zippor. Now, like the new Pharaoh in Exodus, he's concerned about the numbers, maybe that's why it's in there, by the numbers of the Israelites, and seeks to have them cursed by Balaam or Balaam, about whom we know nothing except that he seems to have a reputation of success as a bestower of curses and blessings to order. Balaam, a heathen, we presume, is nonetheless respectful of God, and when Balak proposes to hire him to curse Israel, he wisely defers, talks to God, and God tells him to have nothing to do with this guy. It's like my brother, Ralph, my brother-in-law in Mobile, was the last name on Brown, Hudgens, Richardson, Carr Allison, Sisson. Yeah, that's my brother-in-law, Bill. He's retired now, and workers' comp was his thing. And he said every once in a while, somebody he knew would come in, sit in his office, and they'd want him to deal with their divorce. And he'd, I do your divorce. That'll be $20,000, So that may be low. I don't even know. That may be nothing now. But I just say he would price himself out. So Balaam's like pricing himself out. What do you do with a king? I just don't think you can afford me. But he works it out. And God tells him, go with him. But only do what I say to do. Just, you're with me. Okay. So they work it out. And so he heads off to this place he has to go to do this. And he's on his donkey. And they're going down the road. And I guess you have to be at a high place, where you can see the whole group there, just to throw down a curse. I don't know the particulars. But an angel of the Lord appears on the road, and of course, only the donkey can see the angel. Balaam doesn't understand why his trusty donkey just stopped for no reason, so he starts beating him, which is what he knows to do. And the donkey takes it till he can't take it anymore. And he opens his mouth, and he starts saying, what are you beating me for? You know I wouldn't do this if I didn't have a good reason. There's an angel in the road. And Balaam says, well, I don't see the angel. And he said, well, there's an angel in the road. I mean, you know what? I've been your faithful donkey for all this time. See, only animal that talks in the whole Bible, even in the Christian scriptures. And there it is. But anyway, the angel finally appears to Balaam and tells him to keep going, but to do just what I tell you to do. Balak learns that Balaam is almost at the site and meets him there. And then this really turns into a shaggy dog story. 3 times the Torah goes through this elaborate building of 7 altars, and he makes Balak do this, the king, stupido. He has to build 7 altars all around where he's going to do it, and he's got to have a goat, an acceptable goat, and he has 7 goats. And you got to get the goat, you got to tie the goat up, Then you've got to sacrifice every one of them. And all this is before. So, this is a lot of work. And then Balaam has to exude some beautiful poetry and part of his incantation. And all of a sudden, he gets ready to curse them. And all he can do is bless Israel. The words that come out of his mouth are blessing. And Balak basically says, excuse me? You're supposed to curse Israel, not bless them. Yeah, I know. Well, let's go up to another spot. Then it starts all over again. Balak builds the 7 altars. He has to get the goat. Goat. Tie the goat. Tie. Whatever you do. Sacrifice the 7 goats. It goes through the whole mishigas again. It's just a kind of, like, really? Really? The Torah is usually so laconic, and they just, all this time. And out comes the incantation, and out comes the blessing. And Balak is beside himself. He says, I just don't curse him, don't bless him, just be there. I'll take what I can get at this point. So they go to a third spot. Built 7 altars. And the Torah goes through the whole thing again, a third time. 4, 5, 6, 7. Goat, 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 goat. Tie, 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 tie. Burn, 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 burn. You know, the whole bit. And on the third attempt, the beautiful words that were later quoted and paraphrased in Psalm 84 are what comes out of his mouth. How lovely are thy tents, O Jacob, thy dwelling places, O Israel. Israel's not only blessed, but it's beautiful. And anyway, Balak finally gives up, beaten by God's word through Balaam's mouth. But before they part, Balaam has one more revelation, uttered not about Israel, but about Balak this time, in which he prophesies, a star will come forth from Jacob, a comet from Israel. This is, in Christian understanding, a prophecy about the Messiah. Behold, a star from Jacob shining, a scepter from Israel rising. And Mendelssohn said it beautifully in one of his oratorios. We do it. It's a great piece to do around Epiphany Sunday or late Christmas. But the prophecy for Balak and the Moabites is ultimate doom. So Balak chastened and Balaam undoubtedly exhausted, each go their separate ways. End of story. End of chapter. Great story. Great story. Just love it. It's not in the Christian lectionary anywhere. Nobody's ever read Numbers 22 in church. You ought to. It's just the best. All right. We are in sight of the promised land. I stopped making notes at this point. Once again, there is a rebellion of the people. Wait a minute, what am I doing? Okay, I've duplicated 2 of my bullets, so let's just cut to the last bullet. This is where we are. Aaron dies up on a mountain. He's 123 years old. Miriam has died previous to this. And Moses is told where he will go to die, but not quite yet. They are almost there. There are battles that are fought near the end of the book of Numbers, but they are at the gates. They are there. They are a new generation. They are born Bamidbar in the wilderness, and they have new leadership. Remember, Nadav and Avihu are gone in Leviticus, and now Aaron has died, and his son Eleazar becomes the high priest. So that's a change, the second generation. Moses ordains Joshua, young man, but which means he's probably like 50, and he becomes the new de facto leader because Moses knows he won't be leading them much longer. And so with this new leadership, and I'm leaving out this great story of Pentecost, but you have to be 18 to really read it and enjoy it. That'll get you there. Anyway, but Phineas, he was a zealot. Anyway, but we have a whole new generation that knew not Egypt directly, but they have grown and matured. And in Deuteronomy, which is our last class next Sunday, it's recapped. Deuteronomy means the second telling. And it's a gigantic summary with 2 amazing addresses by Moses. No State of the Union has ever been as eloquent as Moses' 2 discourses. I hope every year, no matter who the president is, but it just doesn't happen. But maybe Washington's second inaugural was maybe sort of approaching that, I don't know. But they are the last testament of the first generation to the multitude that is ready to take possession of the land flowing with milk and honey that they have been promised for so long. So we will cover that next Sunday. Thank you very much, guys.
Pastor, thank you again.
I got to run.
Are there any other announcements from any of the classes? As Lester just acknowledged, we've got one more class where we've got the joint Sunday school classes. And then Aldersgate will be starting another series. I'll be communicating with some of the presidents of the other classes to see if there's any interest in joining those classes at that point. Anything else? You are dismissed. Thank you.
No, he was a part of the offer. He was just commenting that whenever he brought something and he didn't want to do it, he would just say this could be an important amount of money so that you would divorce her, what he said. Now, I would have said $50,000. That's what he close to God would say divorce.
We had no audio at the very beginning.
But fix it.
We had 118 in person. I think it was 11 or 13 on Facebook and 6 on YouTube. I'll send
That's true.
that is true. And people have seemed to enjoy it.
Oh my God.
They've loved it. So, yeah, this is just. Yeah, I don't want to teach that.
Yeah, right.
I think we're going to get interest from Congress participating in it.
I think we will as well. So I'll get that out today. All right, great job.
I'm just
Yeah, you're just the one that actually does it.